Hi class, the topic of this video is active reading and writing. So we're going to start by talking about literary genre. We're going to get very basic here, and I apologize if anyone listening or watching has knows this already, but I don't know what people know. I don't want to make assumptions, so I'm going to get very basic. We're just going to start by talking about genre. When you first encounter a literary work, any literary work, it is important to pin down its genre. So, knowing what kind of work it is, you will have a much clearer sense of what you should be looking for in the text. So, we're going to talk about the three basic genres in literary studies: prose fiction, drama, and poetry. And we could add prose nonfiction to this as well, but I'm going to just stick with these three because that's what we'll be reading in this class. So we'll talk about prose fiction first. This is typically a narrative form, so there will be a storyteller or storytellers who describes characters, events, conversations, and so forth. Common examples of prose fiction are short stories and novels. However, there are many subgenres of prose fiction specific to a writer's time period, to the writer's reading audience, and the writer's purpose. We'll talk about drama. Drama is an ancient literary form that also tells stories, but does so through live performance. So actors carry out actions and speak lines before an audience. Classical drama is subdivided into comedies and tragedies, but many other kinds of plays have evolved as the conventions, audiences, and purposes of dramatic performance have changed over time. And finally, we'll talk about poetry. Like prose fiction and drama, poetry has several narrative forms, like epic poetry or the ballad, for example, but also has many, many lyric forms. And lyric poetry conveys the thoughts and emotions of the speaker or persona. Poetry often relies on strict patterns of rhythm and sound that distinguish it from prose fiction. However, some drama, like Shakespeare's plays, are composed in verse. So let's talk now about how to read these different genres in a very basic and general way. So active reading, what I mean by that is reading with a pen in your hand. Understanding literature is not a passive activity like watching television or trawling social media. Literary texts are hard. They're dense. They have layers of complication we do not normally encounter in other kinds of writing. Furthermore, they were written in different times and places by people whose experiences and priorities in life were different from our own. And for readers, they were writing for readers in certain respects quite unlike ourselves. So reading literature opens a window into our collective past, but it also creates an opening for our own personal discovery and growth. And this richer kind of reading experience does not always come easy, especially in the beginning. So to achieve that kind of experience, you must be alert to all the moves that a writer makes, the structure of the work, again, the importance of genre, the ideas it contains, its language. It is therefore important that you keep a record of your observations and impressions as you read. When you annotate a work, and that's a word you might hear me say elsewhere, so I put it in boldface there. When you annotate a work of literature, you're writing down notes that will help you not only to understand the text, but also to write about it later. When writing about literature, it is much easier to refer back to your notes than to hunt through a poorly marked text, perhaps a text hundreds of pages long, for the material that you need to support your claims. You can read more about active reading in chapter 1 of our textbook, Writing About Literature. So what are some things that you could do to annotate as you read? So one is flag unfamiliar terms and look up their definitions. Label the generic features of the text and key examples of figurative language. If it's a play, how do you know it's a play? Mark that. Examples of figurative language. We're going to be talking a lot about figurative language in the first half of this class. What stands out about the structure and language of the work? Some other things you could do: mark the names of characters the first time you encounter them. I still do this. As soon as I see someone's name for the first time, I circle it. I might jot down a few notes about their relationships to or with other characters. Note what motivates characters. What are the sources of conflict? If you're reading a lyric poem, what motivates the speaker? What does the speaker want the reader to understand or do after reading the poem? What are the consequences for holding certain beliefs or performing certain actions? What are the rewards and punishments? That's always a good question to ask when you're reading narrative. Who gets rewarded and who gets punished? And what might that tell us about the writer's beliefs and values? And finally, write down questions. What do you want to know more about? What do you need to know? Questions provide the fodder for research later. So this is a student gave me a copy of her PDF, her printed PDF of Young Goodman Brown, and that she had annotated. And I thought it was interesting. So just I thought it'd be cool to show it to you all, just as an example of a lightly annotated text. Some of the things, she gave me permission to do this, by the way. Some of the things that she did here that are interesting to me is that she highlighted in yellow these characters: Young Goodman Brown, and then his wife, Faith. I'm not sure that she highlighted all of the names that we see in these 2 pages. It would be good if she did, but she highlighted these 2, and these are certainly Young Goodman Brown is the protagonist of the story, the main character, and his wife Faith plays a big role in it as well. She's also highlighted some things in pink, and coincidentally, I think, she's interested in the pink ribbon in the story that Faith wears in her hair. And I highlighted in blue here some notes that she made. She says, pink ribbons, brightness, so closely twined with faith. They both represent faith and hope, she says. And then she highlighted in pink everywhere that the pink ribbons are mentioned in the text, at least in that column, which I thought was pretty cool. She also highlighted some things in green, and I'm not sure what she was doing there. But I did notice that when she highlights something in green, she puts a question off to the side. So here, talking about Goodman Brown's evil purpose, and she wrote, his what? Which I think is a perfectly legitimate and fair question, especially this early in the story. She also highlighted in green the phrase Old South, and off to the side wrote, like the KKK, which I thought was an interesting question as well. The answer to the question is no, not like the KKK. But nevertheless, good question. She's thinking about the material, trying to understand it. And this is a really, really, I think, good example of textual annotation. So let's talk about a little bit about the writing process, getting from your annotated text to to writing a discussion post or writing an essay. So each week you will read 2 to 3 short pieces in this class that will be used to illustrate and discuss concepts presented in our textbooks. Use these readings to practice close reading and annotation. Each chapter of Writing About Literature includes a section under the heading Questions for Discovering Ideas. Here are the questions for discovering ideas in Chapter 2. Use these questions to guide your annotations that week. You will use these notes to complete weekly discussion assignments and later your midterm paper. The first chapter of Writing About Literature focuses on how to write a good essay. Some of these things you should already have learned in your freshman composition courses, like pre-writing strategies or thesis development, paragraphing, and so forth. But there are some general points worth revisiting here because they're especially relevant to writing about literary texts. One is avoid plot summary. If you are describing instead of explaining, if you're telling your reader what happens instead of making an argument, making a point about it, then you are writing a report rather than scholarly analysis. And no one in an upper level literature course is going to be interested in reading a book report. Everyone has already read the material and knows what it says. So whenever you describe a character, scene, or action, ask yourself, why does my reader need to know this? What does it show? And if you can't answer those questions, then you need to rethink why you're talking about that character, scene, or action. You can read more about this topic on pages 41 to 45 of the textbook. So one way to tell if you're summarizing is to read the topic sentences of your paragraphs. Topic sentences, the first sentence or two of a paragraph should be your claims about the text, not a description or a summary of what the text says. You always want to start your paragraphs, especially as a beginner, saying something about the text and not telling the reader what it says. For more about developing effective paragraphs, you can see pages 30 to 41 in Writing About Literature. Claims, I use that word in the box above. Claims are statements of fact or evaluation and therefore require evidence from the text to support them. It's therefore imperative that you become versatile at incorporating direct quotes into your writing. And we're going to have a much longer series of lessons about that in the coming weeks. And that concludes this short video on active reading and writing.